As you mentioned in your note, the midterm elections usually don't move markets all that much, but there's a lot of focus here on these midterms. How much should we trust the polling that we could get a blue wave in the House, but the Senate will stay Republican?
Well, it's a very important question. Most people haven't forgotten 2016. The United States has the most professional polling industry in the world, and we are the most heavily polled country in the world. And yet the margin of error for opinion polls, which after all are trying to anticipate human behavior, can be as much as 3 to 5 points. So trusting the polls, I would say, do we know ourselves how we want to vote? Because that's really what's going on. I was yesterday in Washington talking to strategists and pollsters from both sides of the aisle, and what I concluded was nobody has very high conviction about this race going into the last few days.
So how do the CEOs, the strategists, the people that you're speaking to line up their portfolio ahead of this, ahead of the potential? What should we brace ourselves for, the potential outcomes and what that does to the market come next week?
Well, the way that I've described this event is as more of a political signal than a market signal, right? I mean, I think what you would see if both houses sort of by surprise went or stayed rather with Republicans, I think the market would rally, because what markets are looking for out of U.S. elections is more drugs, more stimulus. I don't think they're going to get it. The base case, according to polls, is a divided Congress. That's usually considered the most benign outcome for investors, and indeed Americans tend to like this outcome. But that's why I say I think it's a political signal rather than a market signal, because divided Congress is going to mean, I think, some difficulties and a lot of friction ahead. So it surprises that markets react to. So many investors will wait on the sidelines for this. It's really, in my conversations with CEOs and CIOs, we're talking about the midterms as a signal of what the Trump administration does in the next 2 years. And for world leaders, don't forget, many of whom are involved in trade negotiations with the administration or other diplomatic negotiations, they're trying to work out whether Trumpism and Trump will be around 1 year because something happens, 2 years because he's a one-term president, or to get ready for 6.
And how they respond to that. And we'll get into that a little bit later on with the global outlook. I wonder, though, what you think of the argument that no matter what happens in the midterm elections, indeed, no matter what happens in 2020, the U.S. deficit will continue to increase and the U.S. will continue to issue more debt. Because for all the talk that Republicans are fiscal hawks, none of it is playing out. What does that mean for investors? Because voters don't seem to care anymore.
And this is fascinating. If we cast our minds back to only a few years ago when Tea Party Republicans and that caucus was really a force to be reckoned with in Congress, and of course President Obama's hopes of spending were firmly rejected. But if we cast our minds back a little bit further, it was George W. Bush who presided over the biggest expansion of the fiscal deficit at that time with the Medicare prescription drug benefits. So it really seems to be about who's doing the spending and who has the majority. Having said that, I'm not sure the largesse that led to the tax cut this year will be followed by the middle-class tax cut that we hear from President Trump.
So you're not expecting tax 2.0, even if we did see, as you say, the surprising outcome of Republicans keeping strength in both houses?
Well, that'll be the litmus test for the Tea Party as a concept, really, whether they are able to get there. My sense, and from my conversations in Washington this week, neither a second tax cut nor infrastructure spending of any significance anyway is likely to happen, whether it's a divided Congress or both chambers stay with Republicans. So markets may be disappointed with what happens in the second half of the term.